Wow, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Let's Talk Live on the LTL Media channel here. What a first day in the Karen Read case. The opening statements, just unbelievable stuff. And we're going to get into a lot of it today. I wanted to come on tonight. I did a 8-hour marathon stream today, the longest stream that I have done. And it was a really good time to spend that time with all of you and go through today's full testimony. And oh my God, I mean, in my opinion, if Lally's going to go the way that he's going to go, I think it's going to be a clear win for the defense. I think it's going to be a clear win for the defense anyway. But just looking at how he presented himself today, we're going to get into all of that. What I did was I took extensive notes today during the testimony and translated that. I'm going to show up a presentation here in a little bit. And of course, Jennifer Coffindaffer, we'll get into that as well. Jennifer Coffindaffer had to insert herself today with a really weird live stream. She popped up and did a 15-minute live stream on the lunch break. So we'll play through that. I started watching some of it earlier on the channel, but then they broke back into court. And then I want to go through both opening statements. If you haven't seen those, we'll play through them live. And I want to keep peeking in at Court TV this evening because Nick Rocco is going to be on there. And I possibly want to bring that up and play through that as well. So let's get into my presentation. I just want to look into the chat. Let's see. Elliot says, thanks for streaming today, Brian. Thank you. I'm going to try to do my best to stream as much as I can. I do have a full-time job, so it's hard for me to stream every day. I really wish I could, but I just can't. I have to pay the bills, and I have to work at my full-time job. So in between my days off, I will either do a mix of just streaming the trial and or actually going down there and then coming back and streaming. I just haven't worked out what type of schedule I want to go on. But I will be down there at some point to support. So just have to figure out how I'm going to work this out. But if not, in between of everything, when smaller clips come out, I can just start doing some review and recap of the testimonies throughout the day. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, what we ended at today, we had a lot of, it was pretty much all of the prosecution today. Adam Lally had Paul O'Keefe, Erin O'Keefe. They had Officer Surf on the stand as well, and went through all of their direct testimony. And then when we got to the end of the day, David Yanetti was going to cross the officer, and they ended up deciding to break court for the day. I believe it was just a little past 4 p.m. or right around 4 p.m. So you will see the cross-examination tomorrow of the officer on the stand. And I think fireworks are going to fly tomorrow. But let me pull up my presentation of my notes that I took today. We'll go through that, and then we'll go through Coffindaffer first, and then both opening statements. And I really appreciate everybody being in here tonight to get this recap. It's really nice to see everybody in here. And so let me just pull up my presentation here. I just put this together a little while ago. So we have today, we have the Karen Read trial had stopped. This is day one of the recap and review. And I'll just page through here. So I looked at this and I said, is Lally actually trying to lose this case? He, in my opinion, brought no energy, no passion. I don't want, obviously, the Commonwealth to win anyway. I'm 100,000% behind Karen Read. She's being framed and she's factually innocent of all these bogus charges that have been brought up on her. So I'm sitting here today and I'm looking at Lally. I mean, he got Paul and Aaron up on the stand. Paul was first, and then got Aaron up, and it just was not going the way he wanted. He wanted to really dig into the character of Karen Read and what type of person she was. And I was kind of sitting here and I asked my audience when we're watching, I said, do you think that some of the O'Keefes have come around? Because they were not giving that in that Lally wanted. He wanted them to come back, I think, and say, oh, she's a horrible person. She did terrible things. She argued with John all the time. And we'll get in my notes here in a second. But I don't think that the in that Lally was looking for, and you can sense the frustration in his voice. He was sighing a lot. He was shuffling around a lot. He looked very lost, and he looked very, very nervous on his opening statement. And then you had the flip side of Yanetti comes in fully confident, blast right out, right in your face. Karen Read was framed, and that set the tone. And I think once Yanetti got out there after being literally bored by Lally for 45 minutes, I think he was able to grab the jury's attention. He grabbed my attention, certainly, and gave it a really hard listen. So we'll get into my notes here, and I took extensive notes. So day one, jury instructions. Judge Bev puts out, jury can take notes, but can't take them home at night, of course. Jury cannot do any type of research on the case outside of the courtroom. And then Judge Bev said that the public has not heard all the evidence in this case. And I find that to be true because we heard a lot of additional details about Michael Proctor today. And I said this at the very, very beginning when this trial started. I said this to the audience. I said, listen, all the things that you've been privy to, all of the things that you've heard so far is not all of the evidence that's going to come out in this case. There's going to be many, many other things. I think things that are going to surprise you. I think things that are going to make your mouth literally drop on the floor. I heard quite a few things today that made my mouth kind of drop. And you could see that during the stream that I did a couple of hours ago watching full trial day. But we haven't heard everything. And believe me, Yanetti Jackson have really dug in. And I want to hear more about the communication between all of the people that are involved. And I think we are going to hear about that. And we did hear more about Michael Proctor today, and we will get into that as we page through my notes. So let me get to the next section here, and we'll look at Lally. I'm just going to back myself out a little bit here. Let's go to this view here. Let's see, where am I? Okay, so I think Lally pushed extremely hard today on that soured relationship theory. And I think that's when he had Paul and Aaron on the stand and was really pushing for that, but he wouldn't get it. He couldn't get it. And we'll talk a little bit more about their testimony here in a moment. I just want to pull this up. Hang on one second. Donna, thank you so much for the $1.99 super sticker. I appreciate the support. If you want to support Super Chat, whatever, you can do that. And I have my link up there in the top to buy me a coffee. And Nightbot will be dropping all those affiliated links here in the chat as we go through. So we have, he stated that there was 6 foot of snow on Mr. O'Keefe when he was found. Now, I wasn't sure if I screwed up my notes, and I have to go back and actually listen to that opening statement again. I could be wrong, but I could have swore that Lally said that there was 6 inches of snow found on Mr. O'Keefe when he was found by Karen, Kerry, and Jen McCabe. And contrary to that, you're going to hear Officer Seraph say that there was just a light dusting. And you're going to see that. He pushed hard on the I hit him. That hasn't changed. We know that narrative has been out there since the first day of Karen Read's arraignment. And I go back to, and this has been talked about many, many times, and people have said this on the streams, is the my cousin Vinny theory. I hit him. He's saying that I hit him. Questioning, did I actually hit him or not? Let me just pull this up really quick. El Detective Day One, $4.99. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says Karen Read is under no contract order with the O'Keefes from the start of the investigation. That's why Erin O'Keefe hasn't spoken to Karen since. And that might be possible, absolutely. And I still laugh at this whole theory that we're all paid by Karen's team and we're popped up and we're propaganda. So if it's true, Karen, send me the check because I haven't gotten it. I haven't gotten any check. Of course, I'm being facetious here. We're here doing this in support of Karen because we completely believe that Karen is actually innocent. So I felt in these notes are in no particular order. This is just things that I was randomly writing down. No passion or energy in his delivery all day at all. He left out Ryan Nagel's 10-2 statement. Now, remember this. This was in the original drafting of the Commonwealth's affidavit where you had the witness, Ryan Nagel, outside 34 Fairview that night when he drove off and he looked over at Karen's SUV, said that Karen was in her SUV alone with the dome light on with her hands at 10-2. So if that's true and Ryan Nagel saw that and said it in his statement, and most likely will testify when called, that means that John was not in her SUV at that point. So where would John have to be? Well, he would have to be inside 34 Fairview. And the reason I say that is Ryan Nagel said in his statement that I didn't see John on the ground. I didn't see John walking up the street. I didn't see John under Karen's car. So that the only place that John could be at that point, knowing that he is going to 34 Fairview that night, would be inside the house at that point. Shelly, the $5 says, thank you for the recap, Brian. I think I saw you earlier today. Shelby, I'm sorry. I think I saw you earlier today in the chat, and I do appreciate you coming back here and spending time over here. Just give me a break. I'm going to take a sip of water. And the funny thing is, too, I can't remember if it was Paul or Erin testified that I think in a conversation, and I can't remember either one, and maybe the chat can help me out here because there was a lot to absorb today. There was conversation of what happened that night, and Karen said, and I think it was Erin. She asked, well, what happened? And Erin testified today, well, I dropped John off at 34 Fairview. I left and he never came home, or I never heard from him. I believe it was Erin that said that. Erin actually testified to that in court today, and that actually crushed Lally. I'm sure it crushed him when she said that, or it was Paul. I can't remember. And maybe the chat can help me out here because there was a lot to absorb today. So then he says that he left out Karen. He leaves out Karen giving John mouth-to-mouth, but the officer during his testimony says that Karen had blood around her mouth when he arrived at 34 Fairview. It was Aaron. Thank you. So you have the fact of Lally leaving out the fact that Karen was there. When Sheriff arrived at the scene, he sees Karen giving mouth-to-mouth. And I go back to the theory of this. If you want to kill John, if you don't want John alive, if you're this spiteful, vindictive, evil person, then why are you there giving your boyfriend that's dying in the snow mouth to mouth? That would make absolutely no sense. But the funny thing is, when you see Kerry and Jen, their body language is extremely calm, not interested, and walking off. And you see Kerry on her phone, talking, texting. Who is she talking to? I want to see her phone records. Who did she call at that particular point? She was on her phone quite a bit. Made a call, hung up, made another call, hung up. Who was she calling? We need to know who she was calling. I think Lally, in my opinion, is going to rely, because today was an absolute disaster. And I have witness testimony up there, and it didn't go, I think, the way that he planned. But I think Lally's going to rely heavily on the lab experts, the scientific data, and the character witness testimony. But today was an absolute dump for him for character witness testimony. It was a complete disaster. And I'm sure he went home and pulled out whatever hair he has left. And probably tomorrow you see him come in with a bald head, or is smoking probably 90 packs of cigarettes outside the courtroom. Excuse me 1 second. So we'll go on here with my notes, opening statements. Then on the flip side, you have David Yanetti, opening statements, leads right out the gate with Karen Read was framed. And that set the tone. And I think it grabbed the jury's attention, in my opinion, because it certainly grabbed my attention. He talked about that he is going to expose a faulty investigation. There was no real investigation. And then he got it on the record. And remember, we heard this in the previous hearing just before jury selection. He put on the record today in court, and I love this power move that he did. He put in court, Brian Albert was a first responder and a fellow police officer, and he did not respond to the situation. He said, with all the action that was going on outside 34 Fairview at that point, the spotlights, the sirens, the fire trucks, the police officers showing up, the ambulance, Brian Albert did not come outside his house and help a fellow Boston police officer. He stayed inside his house. And I love the fact that he brought that up and put it on the record. Now we hear more about Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor never asked to investigate, never wanted to go inside 34 Fairview, never went up and said, hey, you got a Boston police officer on the front lawn that is dying or dead. What's going on? There's no search warrant of Brian Albert's house from Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor falsified the time in which he picked up Karen's SUV. And David Yanetti said that he will show that and prove that in court. There's no video of Karen hitting John at 34 Fairview for me. And I said this all along. And I remember Nick Rocco saying this one time as well. If you want to prove that Karen Read did this, then show me the video. Show me the video at 34 Fairview of Karen Read hitting John O'Keefe. No one's cameras worked that night. None of the Ring camera information got saved. Supposedly everybody's cameras got erased or didn't record that night. If you want to prove this without a shadow of a doubt, then show me the video. Ironically, there's no video. It's gone. Erased. No one captured it. I find that hard to believe. Find it hard to believe because you know why? Because it did not happen. It did not happen. And all the video that night was erased because it did not happen. He talks about Ryan Nagel's 10-2 statement, where Lally left it out. Yanetti brings it in and lets the jury know about it. It was a great point. It was a solid point, and I'm glad that Yanetti brought that back in. He confirms to the jury that Jennifer McCabe's 2:27 a.m. Google search did happen. Now, he didn't go because he wasn't allowed to refer to the FBI testimony and the FBI expert, but he snuck it in there, and he was smart about it, and he did get that in there on the record today. He talked about also the 6 people that left 34 Fairview in the evening in question but didn't see John's body outside. They were just a few feet away. They would have seen John's body. All those people that went out to their vehicles that night and walked past and walked by the area of the lawn where John's body was. Why did no one see him? No one made a report. No one said, hey, what's that? Who's in the snow? What's going on? None of that. None of that. More Yanetti. Michael Proctor confiscates Karen Read's phone and searched it illegally. Didn't have a search warrant. Went in there. And this is disgusting behavior on Michael Proctor's part. Went in there, looked for nude photos, and bragged to it to his friends in text message. Had conversations. And that will be shown in court. David Yanetti will prove that and show that. I love the fact that Yanetti simplified the timeline. He went through the timeline for the jury where Lally was all over the place. And you're going to see the different dynamics here between the two. He talked about the no injuries to John's upper body. John is 6'2", 215, 218. Why are there no injuries to his upper body? Where he would have been hit by Karen Reed's SUV. No upper body injuries. And I proved this. I posted a photo about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, of me standing next to the same exact model that Karen Reed drove. And if you would have saw it, where it would have lined up, it would have been all of this area of my chest. Why were there no injuries there? And John's 2 inches taller than me. I'm 6 foot. John is 6'2". If anything, his sternum would have been bruised. He would have had injuries to his upper body, broken ribs. There was none of that. All of his injuries were facial, the back of his skull, the blackened eyes, the cuts on the arm, the dog bites, the scratches, and the defensive wounds on his hands. There were no upper body injuries, no broken legs, no twisted knee, none of that. None of that. If she hit him that hard, why didn't he twist it? Why wasn't there anything in the medical report of a twisted knee or a dislocated knee or a broken leg? If he was hit so hard that he fell out of his shoes, according to what the Commonwealth is saying, then why doesn't he have a broken leg or a twisted ankle or a twisted knee? There's none of that in the MA report. Then we have text between Proctor and Brian Albert reveal that no one in the house was sad that John was dead. Hang on 1 second. Let me give my voice a rest. I'm fired up tonight. I'm fired up. Renee, thank you so much for the 5 on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support. So then we had Paul and Erin O'Keefe's testimony today. Summed up really quick. Basically said that Karen was a good person. She constantly helped with the kids. Karen and John's arguments were nothing out of the normal. Erin asked, this was odd. Erin asked Lally to refresh her mind about statements that she made, or that was odd, and that was really weird. And then obviously at the end, which I thought was a great move, that David Yanetti did not put any of the John O'Keefe's family members today on the spot or ask them any type of cross for either witness. I don't think he needed to. I think he got what he wanted, because Lally did not get what he wanted, where he wanted to paint Karen as this evil, vindictive person that wanted to kill John. He wouldn't give it up. And that's why I go around and say, I wonder if some of the O'Keefes are starting to come around now. I wonder. Okay, so day one, Officer Sharif, I think I'm saying his name right, or probably wrong. His testimony was first on the scene at 34 Fairview. He said that Karen had blood around her mouth when he arrived, which is strange, because if John was outside for the 6 hours that they're saying that Karen left him there after she hit him, wouldn't his blood would have crystallized by then? So why would she have fresh blood around her mouth? Also, this was kind of funny. When Lally showed this photo, which I'm going, what the hell are we looking at? We're looking at a Rorschach here. The officer chuckles when Alan Lally asked to depict what's in this photo during direct testimony, and he answers, a street, and he chuckled, actually kind of laughed, which was funny, because if we're going to roll with this type of photos, I don't know what to tell you. There's some pretty bad photos today that Lally brought up. Also going on, the officer states during testimony that when he arrived, Karen Reed was giving Officer O'Keefe CPR, and she had blood on her face. And I asked the question, if Mr. O'Keefe was in the snow, left to die for 6 hours by Reed, how could his blood still be in liquid form around his mouth, or hasn't crystallized yet? And does a girlfriend that wants her boyfriend dead give him CPR when she gets to the scene? He also said that there was about 6 inches of snow around O'Keefe and a light dusting on him, but he was out there for 5 hours? 6+ hours. Doesn't make any sense. And then here we have the dream team, the power team, which I think actually walked away today with a great day. I can say that if I was Karen, I would be extremely happy with my team today. The opening statement from Yanetti was fire, and we will play through that here in a moment. And I think they did a great job, and I think they are coming for it. They're going to give it to these witnesses, and they're going to expose the absolute complete corruption that is going on in Canton. And we will find out about this. And Karen Reed at the end of this trial is going to walk out of that courtroom an exonerated woman. And I'm going to tell you, the real people will be arrested and tried for what they did. All right. Let's get to Coffindaffer here. She did a really odd, weird live at the recess in court today, and I want to play through that. It was odd, and here we go. And then we will play the opening statements from Lally and Yanetti, and then wrap it up. All right, here we go.
Hey, everyone. Sorry about that. I was definitely interrupted. I don't know if you could hear, but the stream I was doing was being overrun by Kevin, who is Yellowtail. And
so she's clearly running with Kevin here, Yellow Cottage Tales. I don't know why, but she wants to run with him. Oh, I just lost the stream. Hang on. I don't know why she's running with him, but apparently she's hanging with him. All right, let's keep going here.
So I'm getting back on to kind of pick up where I left off. So we've talked about the opening statements on the prosecutor side. Let's talk about the opening statement on the defense
this
side,
should be good.
Which was done by Yanetti, not by Alan Jackson. Yanetti, as I said, I think did a good job of emotionally bringing in his narrative. And his narrative from the get-go didn't even greet the jury, which was, of course, dramatic. His opening statement is, listen, this is a frame job. She was framed.
Did she say that Yanetti didn't even open with welcoming the jury? He absolutely did. He absolutely did. He introduced himself, said, "I'm David Yanetti," and he said good morning and welcomed himself to the jurors. So I don't know what she was watching.
And he brought up the dog bites. He brought up the 227. I think it was very interesting that nothing has changed since the beginning of this case. For those of you who have followed the case, literally nothing has changed in terms of their position.
I'm going to say this too. Jennifer, when you are streaming or making a video, silence your notifications on your phone. You're a professional. You should know this. You do these lives all the time. Her phone literally dings 90 million times during this video. Jennifer, please stop it. Turn off the notifications. All right, let's keep going.
I think might bite them. But we'll see. We'll see. Again, opening statements are not a reflection of facts, but rather a reflection of what that particular attorney believes the facts are going to come out in terms of the witnesses that they discuss. So I think it's really important to remember that. So all in all, I think the prosecution was vanilla, but got everything out they wanted, and
prosecution was disastrous today. Let's just be honest here, Jennifer. It was disastrous. And Lally was trying to lead Paul and Erin down a path that they were not going to go. Lally was trying to get them to say that Karen was this awful person and that she wanted to kill John, and they weren't going to go there. I think they're starting to realize what's going on here. Maybe they're coming around. Maybe they're starting to come around here.
Not try
and I'll tell you, I absolutely, my heart absolutely bleeds for them. You know, they shouldn't be on this stand and be in this position. I feel terrible for John's family that they have to go through this, and to go and open up a trial and be a family member, the first, his brother being put on the stand, then his sister. I mean, it's terrible. It's an awful position that they have to be in. And I can't believe that Al and Lally would put them in that position and literally sat there and led them on for a couple of hours today and got nothing. They weren't going to go there. They were not going to go there.
To become emotional or try to paint a scenario, whereas I think that Yanetti definitely was painting a narrative, which he should as the defense. He needs to paint a narrative. He has no facts on his side. His side is trying to say Chloe the dog bit the arm, and he's trying to say that a search took place at 2:27
It
and
did.
as opposed to 6 in the morning.
It did.
Those are his facts.
It did, Jennifer. And guess what? Your people, your peeps, your peeps, your peeps, the FBI has confirmed it, has factually and by all the data and all the means to investigate if it did happen. Did 2:27 a.m. Google search happen from Jennifer McCabe's phone? Yes, the FBI has confirmed it. Your peeps, Jennifer, your peeps. The FBI has confirmed it.
Facts. So they're very weak, right? They'd be weak at trying to convict anybody. So, or trying to point the evidence toward any other direction. But when your facts are weak, you go after the police. And that's where he has some traction. He has traction because of Trooper Proctor and his unprofessional actions on his personal cell phone when communicating with a friend. And that's going to be a big problem. This reminds me, in some respects, of the OJ situation, where they really went after the lead detective in that case, and they tried to paint him, of course, as a racist. They had all of these recordings, of course, since that's come up many times as to the overall circumstances regarding those recordings, but doesn't matter. He was definitely painted as a racist, and the jury definitely bought into that. That case was a case about Rodney King. It really was never a case, to those jurors anyway, who have come out and spoken. That case was never really a case about whether OJ did or didn't kill his wife and Ron Goldman. In fact, it's interesting because all the facts show it was him, every single bit of facts, but it didn't matter because the distraction worked perfectly. And it reminds me of that just a little bit. In other words, are they going to be able to show that because Proctor was inappropriate at best when discussing this case, if again that testimony shows
if he was inappropriate at best discussing this case, he was more than inappropriate. He went into Karen Reed's phone without a search warrant and searched it illegally, and bragged to his friends that he didn't see any nudes. He was trying to find nudes of Karen Reed. That's pretty disgusting. And the internal investigation that's going on right now should be stepped up, knowing that this testimony was in court today and on the record. And Trooper Proctor should be fired for his actions in this case. Right now, he should be fired. Absolutely should be fired.
That, because a lawyer can say anything. I want to hear the testimony. I want to see what Proctor has to say. I want to see what the friend has to say, and I want to read the text messages. But assuming it's as Yanetti laid out, so problematic, because it looks like this is a guy that's completely unprofessional. And, that's a problem. Again, I've always said from the beginning, anyone who was an officer who came up on the scene and saw a dead body at the curtilage of a lawn, that saw clear signs of being hit in terms of, and again, this is something you can recognize when you have bilateral puffing and bruising of both eyes. That is from a cranium crack. And so I believe, from the according to the EMTs and the people that came on scene, and what the officers had seen, remember, these are staties. These are state police troopers. They investigate accident investigations. And you have the person that hit him saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. This was not rocket science in terms of believing that they had essentially a man that was hit, and also they also realized they had to get this person warmed up on that scoop stretcher they talked about, and in an ambulance and into the hospital. We call it a load and go. You know, I'm a tactical EMT, and doing my rotations on the ambulance, that's what you do when you see a situation like this. You're just praying you can save their lives. So it's very quick. Hopefully we'll get to see the run reports, but we're going to hear from them. And I guess my point is
The notification,
that
please.
that's what they thought had happened, because all the facts led to that. So you wouldn't go and start knocking on the doors of every neighbor right at that moment. Your key evidence, or the key mission.
Did she say that you wouldn't go and knock on neighbors' door? Wait a minute here. I'm going back here. Did she just say that you would not go and knock on yeah, it's Pelvin messaging her. Did she just say that you would not go on neighbors' doors and start knocking immediately? I got to hear that again. I can't believe my ears.
And I guess my point is that that's what they thought had happened, because all the facts led to that. So you wouldn't go and start knocking on the doors of every neighbor right at that moment.
She said that you would not. Wait a minute. What kind of investigating, what school of investigation did you go to, Jennifer Coffindaffer? I mean, for Christ's sakes, I'm not a police officer. I've never been through a criminal justice course. I'm not a police officer. I'm not FBI. It's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It would be kind of procedure, in my humble opinion here, that if I'm an officer that's called to a scene where there's potentially someone dying or dead, and they're on someone's front lawn, especially another police officer's lawn, and I was the police officer that responded, or the lead detective in this case, I probably would go knock on the door and say, what happened? Does anybody know anything? Can you tell me what you saw? Can you tell me what you heard? Did you see anything strange? Did you hear anything strange? I mean, that's basic logic in investigation. What is she talking about? That wouldn't be the first thing that you would do. Oh, because the ambulance driver said this, so you're gonna roll with that first. That absolutely makes no sense.
Your key
makes no sense.
Evidence, or the key mission at that point, is to try to save this person's life, try to interview individuals on scene, try to protect that immediate area.
Which none of this happened.
Try to collect whatever evidence
None of this
you
happened.
see.
Oh, solo cup.
That
right.
is your immediate worry. And remember, they're doing this in the middle of a blizzard conditions. Definitely that is coming out now that the snow started. And then, of course, you also see them explain that the body of John O'Keefe was laying there and nothing underneath him. It was just all grass. All the snow was around him. And I think that's really a telling sign, too, of how long he had been laying out there, and that he wasn't put out there on snow. One could argue that, I suppose, he uniformly melted every ounce of snow around him. But in freezing cold conditions, and the freezing cold condition of the ground, which we now know, as I talked about before, the whiplash of having your head go back with the impact of a car going 24 miles an hour could have caused that cracked skull and cracked cranium.
How do you get the cut? How do you get the cut on his head? When he hit the soft grass, that's how he cut his head. You cut your head on soft grass, or you cut your head on grass. I mean, it's not like, come on, give me some theory that he like hit his head on the pavement. They're not even saying that. They're saying that he fell back on the lawn. I think you'd have a pretty hell of a concussion. Maybe possibly a cracked skull, but I don't see a cut happening that way. I certainly don't see all the injuries to his face, the front of his face. If he hit the back of his head, he split his head open when he went back, how the hell did he get the injuries to the front of his face?
and again led to that internal bleeding and the raccoon eyes, as we call them. So in any event, I want to move on now from opening
Oh, all
statements
right.
and talk a little bit about Paul O'Keefe.
Okay,
His
let's hear
brother was
about
the
it.
first to be put on the stand. It was so hard. I don't know, for those of you who watched it, it was palpable.
Yeah, it's terrible that Lally had to put him through that today. That's what was hard about that testimony.
The emotion and grief and sadness just pouring off of Paul O'Keefe's tongue. It was really sad. I think the prosecution didn't do a good job of bringing out, maybe they will at the end, Paul O'Keefe's love for John O'Keefe and who he really was, not only as an officer, but really more so as a man, as a brother, as a son, as a father to the children of his sister. I wanted to see that emotion play out so that the jury could really understand the victim. Maybe they'll get back to that. But the key points in his testimony were: one, he liked Karen Reed. That was the second only girlfriend of John O'Keefe.
Yeah, he did.
And he liked her. And he had met the parents. He obviously knew her well, knew the names of everybody, had met with her many, many times, and he liked her. And I think that's really telling. The other piece that was ended on highlights, and this will be the last one I touch on because we're getting ready to go back in court, but was that Karen O'Keefe called and asked if she could come over. And Paul O'Keefe said, yes, come on over.
So she was just, Coffindaffer's trying to paint Karen as this evil person that wanted John dead. So if that's true, then why is the family still allowing her to come over? They said that she was nice. And Coffindaffer even just said here, Paul painted her as this good person. Well, isn't that helping the defense to say that Karen is not this killer, this awful person?
And so she comes over. She comes with her father. This is really...
Oh, it's the moment.
Shows me a lot.
Okay. What is it going to
show testimony you? Is, and again, testimony is facts now.
Okay.
So those go into the facts to be considered by the jury.
Okay.
She walks up the stairs and goes to John O'Keefe's bedroom, apparently up there for about 15 minutes or so, removes items. So at the time you just find out that the 2-year relationship, love of your life.
How do we know it's not medication? We know that Karen has some health issues. I think that's been pretty open in court. They've talked about it. I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to know about talk about Karen's medical issues or medical problems or needs. How do we know that it's not something to treat that? And we probably will find out. Believe me, the defense is probably going to say what those items are. So yeah, maybe it's some medication that she needs, things that might help her and aid her in that. We haven't heard about that yet, but I'm pretty sure it's probably going to have some of those items in there.
Life is dead. You run up the stairs and get your things. I mean, she had a separate household that she was maintaining.
So what?
But she goes up there, and I think there's two things that are important here. One, the detachment, the fact it's going to be clear, I think, that she's never going to return to this house. She never goes to the children.
I think this
one
is a
of whom
stretch.
had just found out that their surrogate father was dead, and the other that was getting notified. She didn't even, that wasn't on her mind. What was on her mind was going upstairs. The other thing we're going to hear about is that there is recordings at that house, John O'Keefe's house, that are gone. And they're gone from the time frame that she would have returned to the house to when she departed that house in the early morning hours.
It was probably deleted by the Commonwealth.
Why was that erased? And
we know why was 42 minutes of the Sallyport video erased? Why was there 2 to 3 minutes of the library video erased? Why were all the videos in the area of 34 Fairview that night, everybody's camera, all the videos that should have been there, they're all gone. No one had anything. No one has anything. All the ring camera footage, all the footage of all the cameras in that, they didn't work that night. Where is all that footage, Jennifer? Can you explain that? Can you explain that to the audience? Where is all that?
She knew the system because she says that when she's reaching out to Brian Higgins about them kissing. Don't worry, I know, where the cameras are and such. So I think those were two important pieces of evidence that the prosecution wanted the foundation laid. She got there, she went upstairs, she spent about 15 minutes. Did she erase the recordings? Because we know the recordings were erased by someone and the children didn't erase them. We're going to hear that testimony. We know that based on the court documents. So I think that this is the setup to, this is the time frame she would have had to do it. The fact she beelines up those stairs with her father, gathers some things, comes down with a bag full of things, and has that time alone, and then only spends 30 minutes with the family she was around, the children she'd been around, per testimony, 3 to 4 days a week that she was kind of helping raise. So it's going to be emotional. Paul O'Keefe is still on the stand, but this was the last point the prosecution made with him. It's disappointing we can't see the jury's faces. You never can, right? I would love to see how they're reacting to this. I would also want to see how Karen Reed is acting to what Paul O'Keefe says, especially when they see each other, highly emotional. She's asking in the hospital, is he dead? Is he dead? I need to know if he's dead. And she finds out, and Paul O'Keefe blows a kiss to Karen Reed. That tells me their relationship was close. He's telling you their relationship was close.
Yeah. So
what changed
paints her in a very
though?
Good light.
And that's Jennifer. Where I think we're going to take the turn now. Obviously, we've already started the turn. That she goes up the stairs, removes the thing, has really time to adjust or to erase camera footage, and then leaves the house in the middle of this horrible information. And I think this is where we're going to probably see the turn of Paul O'Keefe, who liked Karen Reed, to what is going on here and why
none of that
is she
happens.
Disassociating, and where is the Karen Reed that I thought I knew. All right, getting back into the courtroom, I really want to thank everybody who tuned in, and I'm going to be there for the second half. I want to see the rest of this testimony, the beginning testimony.
All right, good night. Have a good night. All right, Nick Rocco's on Court TV right now. Let's pull that up. Let's play through that. I want to hear Nick, and then we'll get to opening statements today.
The United States Supreme Court of Massachusetts did deny the most recent motion we put in place, but we are going to try to move forward because some of the things that we had brought to their attention was basically tailoring this. And one of the things we had suggested was bringing the jurors through the back door and bringing them through a bus. And we found out today that's actually what they did.
That's what they did.
Right. So why do we need... Where do you
guys want to be? Like right behind us where we are here?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even if we were on the registry steps here, they don't want to...
No, you're not getting this spot. This is our spot. This is our... You don't get this spot. This is ours. Joseph, let me ask you. You've been testifying. I mean, trying cases here for years.
25 years. Nick looks dapper. He's got to give it to Nick. He looks
great. What's happening here?
Look, let me make one quick correction. Just so your audience is clear. Every single person out here is entitled to be in that courtroom. They just can't bring their signs, their pins, their buttons with them.
Absolutely.
This is an open and public trial.
But there's no room for them.
There's not room for them because they had to logistically move from a larger courtroom to a smaller courtroom to accommodate the jurors being able to see the witnesses. But just to be clear, this is an open and public trial. Look, I've seen a lot of things.
Right.
I've never seen anything like this. This case never ceases to amaze me. The way that this case has been aggressively litigated in the court of public opinion, the vitriol on both sides of this case.
Both sides.
It's generated an almost circus-like atmosphere out here. But that's in stark contrast to what took place today. Today, finally, they got in that courtroom. They closed the door behind them, and they started to get it on. Sigh of relief, I think, from a lot of people.
So, Nick, what is... You can't get in the courtroom.
He's outside the courthouse.
Folks are watching outside. They're watching different places. Is it a disappointment to not be able to be there since everyone is so invested in all this?
Well, I don't think it's that we can't be there. I think
there's not room for you, Nick.
Well,
there's no room for you. Trust me. I can't get in there. There wasn't room for me today either.
So
I get in.
Oh,
Did you get in?
Yeah,
I get in,
of course you got in.
So
Listen to the
listen, I
accent.
will say, I'm sure I'll be in
Who's
there.
going to keep him out?
I'll be in there 1 or 2 days. But what I will say is, no matter if we're inside that courtroom or outside that courtroom, the Reed family knows that they have 100% support of every single one of us. You don't really have opposing people out here. Did you see? I didn't see anybody today.
Yeah.
Nobody. And it's been that way since the beginning. You know, we're here, we show our support. And if people want to counter protest, they're more than welcome to, but they can't, you know, we're fighting for their rights as well. If someone wants to counter protest, they can't come within the 200 feet of the court. Yeah. So what we're doing is ultimately fighting for them as well, to be out here and voice your opinion, because the First Amendment in Massachusetts and in America is important. You got to keep fighting for that.
Yeah, I think everyone respects that right, the right to assemble, the right to peacefully protest, but it's a balancing act, isn't it? Judge Cannoni has to make sure the protesters don't inject themselves into the trial. The last thing anyone wants to do is 2 weeks into this have to declare a mistrial because a juror heard something he or she shouldn't have heard. A juror or a witness was intimidated. I'm not accusing anyone of doing that yet, but Judge Cannoni has to make sure that this case is tried inside the four walls of that courtroom. Again, I was in there today, and she gave 2 preliminary charges warning jurors to disregard anything they see or hear, because, look, it's the elephant in the room. We know there's outside influence.
It's like that in every case. They have to self-report. If their spouse says something, if they happen to turn on the television, if they hear something pops on social media, they got to report it.
It's a lot harder to do when you have 250 people in pink shirts holding signs, waving American flags, though, isn't it? And look, no one's saying they can't do it. Just saying that the case has to be tried in the courtroom. I've had cases not quite like this, but similar to this, and it's something that both sides always worry about. Outside influences on the trial.
All right, we're out of time for tonight, but both of you guys will be back. All right,
Benny.
Joseph Crowley Jr., Nick Rocco, appreciate it.
Congratulations.
When we
Nick.
come back, folks, I will reveal
you,
something else that you need to know tonight.
Representing.
Plus,
good job,
coming
Nick.
up next hour.
Good job, Nick.
In Boise, Idaho, the doomsday prophet Chad Daybell on trial for the murder of his.
I think the segment's going to move out here. So that was good. Great little touch by Nick. That's good. Good stuff. I mean, can you imagine that? Fucking Nick on Court TV. That's pretty good, man. Get to sit up there with Vinny and chop it up a little bit. That's good stuff. I'm really happy for him. That's really great. That's a proud moment. That's something that you're proud of. You know, you made it on Court TV. That's pretty boss. Good for him. I love it. All right, let's get into opening statements. Let's listen to the lollygagging. We'll go through this here, and then we'll get to the fire, David Yanetti. We're just going to blast it. Again, my opinion, Lally, no energy, no passion, no nothing. Let's get through this, and let's hear the Lally splaining, because this is pretty brutal. God, this is bad.
So as Her Honor was telling you, this is one of the 2 opportunities that I will get to address. The first of which right now, essentially what I'm going to attempt to do, and I know you heard over the course of the impanelment process a number of different witnesses that were listed out as far as potential witnesses in this case. So what my intent here is to provide as much of a roadmap as I can through those waters and help you to navigate sort of who these people are and what relation they have to this case. We start with John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe grew up in Braintree. He was 46 years old when he passed. He was the son of John O'Keefe Jr. and Margaret or Peggy O'Keefe. He was a brother to Paul O'Keefe and to his sister, Kristen Furbush. Kristen was married, and so John's brother-in-law was a man named Stephen Furbush, and they had 2 children who were very young in 2013. Now, in 2013, Kristen, unfortunately, tragically passed away, succumbing to cancer in November.
I'll speed it up just a little bit. I'm not going to go full 2 times speed, because for people that are coming in is, a lot of people come into this and they haven't heard of this trial yet. So I want to make sure we just do a good, clear recap, but I'll speed it up a little bit. But when Yanetti talks, I'm going to play it all out, flat out, so we can hear it on normal speed.
Within months of that, Mr. O'Keefe's brother-in-law and Kristen's husband, Stephen, passed away as well. Now, initially, when John O'Keefe's sister passed away, sort of the initial plan for that situation was that John O'Keefe was going to move in with Stephen Forbush and kids and assist as far as raising them. And then when Stephen passed away a few months after his wife, before those plans could be finalized, John O'Keefe then moved in with his niece and nephew and assumed the parental role and assumed legal guardianship.
Real quick, let me just get to these. Let's see. This is Audrey. Thank you so much for the buy me a coffee. She said, this is amazing. I was working all day and couldn't watch anything. So thank you for recapping. I so appreciate this. And again, you know, I know a lot of you probably watched this live today, but we got to do a recap. We got to recap if the people didn't see it. So I got to be fair. We'll play this through, and then obviously we'll get to Yanetti at the end. And then Lady Law, thank you so much for the coffee. Said supporting not too much, but something. Anything is always something. Thank you for being a moderator here. I appreciate you doing it. Let's get through Lally explaining.
Now, he was assisted in this.
If you need to leave, you can leave. It's fine. I mean, I'm going to do the recap. That's why I did this.
And where John moved into the home with the 2 children there. There were other parents within the neighborhood,
very
parents
important.
within the children's age group. You'll hear from a number of them over the course of this trial, but they included Mrs. Kerry Roberts and Mrs. Jennifer McKay. They helped Mr. O'Keefe out during those initial stages and during the time that he assumed this role. He also got help from his work. John O'Keefe was a proud member of the Boston Police Department, had been for many years. He had been a patrolman prior to moving in with children and assuming this sort of role. Boston Police Department helped him greatly as far as conditioning him to more of a desk role, working in the sex offender unit with more regular hours to sort of assimilate himself to this new life and this new role that he assumes with his children. Initially, John O'Keefe lived in the house with kids. However, in 2018, they moved into a new home, sort of new home that they could have as their own. That home is located also within the town of Canton, sort of on the Stoughton side of Canton at One Meadows Avenue. John O'Keefe raised these children, assuming guardianship for them for about 8 years. His niece, who was the elder of the 2, was about 14 at the time that John O'Keefe died, and his nephew was about 11 years old at the time that John O'Keefe died. January 28th, 2022. It was a relatively typical day. It was Friday going into Saturday of January 29th. Sort of typical in the sense of most sort of suburban parents. There were a lot of activities, weekend sports, practices, games, things of that nature that the O'Keefe and Forbush family had to look forward to. One little difference when it came to that particular day of January 28th and the 29th is the weather. So there had been predicted, and there was going to be a snowstorm, an insignificant one. The blizzard essentially was coming in overnight that Friday into Saturday, lasting through most of the day on Saturday the 29th. And as a result of that, most of those sort of typical weekend routine activities that would keep most people, including those living in the town, Canton, busy, had been canceled ahead of time. Everybody knew what was coming. Everybody knew essentially you weren't going to leave your house all that much the following day. Now, also on January 28th, Mr. O'Keefe had received some news in respect to his niece. So his niece and her best friend were in 8th grade at the time, going to high school in the fall of 2022. They both applied to a private school called Bishop, and they both found out on the 28th that they had been accepted to us. So the friend, as well as her father, a gentleman by the name of Michael Camerano, who's he and his wife, Catherine Camerano, were friendly with John O'Keefe. They had children around the same ages as both John's niece and his nephew. And they had come over to their house on Meadows Ave that evening to celebrate girls getting into bed. The nephew of John, 11-year-old, was sleeping over a friend's house that night. He left that home sometime around 7 p.m. or so, got picked up, and he went to sleep over at his friend's house. John O'Keefe and Michael Camerano then decided to travel out to a local establishment on Washington Street called CF Bar and Restaurant. You're going to hear testimony, and you're going to see surveillance video, and you're going to see receipts and all kinds of things from a variety of different establishments, all sort of located within Canton Center along that strip of Washington Street. Now, they get Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camerano leave the girls at home. They then go to CF McCarthy's, arriving there sometime between 7:30 and 8 p.m. They eventually cajole another friend of theirs, Mr. Kurt Roberts, to come out to the bar and join them as well. And there's some other people that are located within the bar, including Mr. James Sullivan, who we hear from, who was present at the bar that night as well. Eventually, the defendant, Karen Reed, joins them at this establishment, CF McCarthy's, sometime just before 9 p.m. Now, John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had met sometime in 2004. They had dated briefly during that time and reconnected sometime around March of 2020, around the time of the COVID-19 sort of pandemic shutdown. They had started dating around that time period, or reconnected during that time period, and the defendant had stayed at the house in Canton several nights a week. She had helped out with the children. In the month or so leading up to Mr. O'Keefe's death, the relationship soured. You will see text messages between Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed to that effect. You will hear testimony from the children, from John's niece and nephew, in regard to things they observed within that relationship. And you'll hear testimony from some other individuals as far as their observations or things that they heard. Turning to January 29th, 2022. Just after 6 a.m., the Canton Police Department receives a 911 call from a woman reporting a male party subsequently identified as John O'Keefe, found in the snow outside a residence at 34 Fairview Road. At the time, as I mentioned, blizzards that had been predicted was occurring, heavy snow, temperatures in the teens, wind bustling around. Officer Stephen Saraf and Officer Stephen Lally of Canton Police were dispatched along with Canton Fire and EMS, and you'll hear from them in regard to their response and what they observed on scene. In particular, with Officer Saraf, you'll have as an exhibit anticipates a cruiser camera video from his cruiser detailing or memorializing sort of his response in the darkness, in the blizzard-type conditions as he's driving from Canton Police Station, where he was located when he received the call, to 34 Fairview Road. When they arrived there, they observe three females, sort of off to the left side of the property. When I say the left side of the property, I mean if you're standing out in the street facing 34 Fairview Road, off to the left side of the property, there's a flagpole, there's a fire hydrant, there's some bushes. That is where Mr. O'Keefe is located. Off to the right side of the property is sort of the driveway and the mailbox, and other things that you'll become familiar with through photographic evidence and other means through the course of this trial. The three females that the officers observed there were then identified as the defendant Karen Reed, Mrs. Jennifer McCabe, who had received a phone call earlier in the morning from the defendant, as well as Mrs. Terry Roberts, who had also received a phone call early that morning from the defendant. The several firefighters from the Canton Fire Department you'll hear from in regard to their observations of injuries, abrasions, and lacerations to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe. You'll hear their testimony in regard to swelling of his eyes and other injuries that he observed. They observed redness from the cold that he had been lying out in for some time. You'll hear the testimony from the firefighters Timothy Nuttall, Anthony Filmati, Matthew Kelly, Francis Walsh, Tim McLaughlin, and Greg Woodbury. At least from three of those firefighters, you'll hear testimony anticipates detailing statements that the defendant made too when they had asked about the origination of some of those injuries. The defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him. Mr. O'Keefe was then taken from the front lawn onto what they call a scoop stretcher. As he's doing that, I anticipate you'll hear Ms. Roberts' testimony that despite the 6 inches of snow approximately that was on top of Mr. O'Keefe's body and the snow throughout the roadway, front yard, everywhere around where he was, there was grass underneath Mr. O'Keefe, where his cell phone was located underneath his body as he lay on that front lawn. He was then transported by firefighters Kelly, Filmati, and Nuttall, as well as the ambulance being driven by firefighter McLaughlin to the Good Samaritan Medical Center. Once there were some observations, and you'll hear testimony.
All right. I think the chat's going to win. I think the chat's going to win here. I'm going to give in, but I'm going to do this. Let's do it the right way. If you want to go back and watch Lally explain, you can take this link here. And for all my newcomers that come in, you can take that link there, go to it, and we'll watch it. I can't do it. I thought I could. I just can't. I'm 10 minutes in. I'm losing my mind already. I'm losing my mind. Let's do this. Let's pull up David Yanetti. I already gonna tell you, everybody wants to hear Yanetti. I'm gonna leave the link there. If you want to go back and watch this, well, you can watch it. I gotta hear Yanetti again. Let's hear David Yanetti, but I did drop the link. I can't do it. I just can't. I can't with Lally. So we'll pop out of this. Let's bring up the real MVP today, David Yanetti. And I'm gonna tell you, Coffindaffer is going to be wrong right off the bat because she says that he doesn't even say good morning. He doesn't welcome himself to the jury, which is a complete lie. So let's pop this back down. We'll sit back for the ride. And if you want to go back and watch Lally, you can. I dropped the link, but here we go.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road in Canton on January 29th of 2022. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. As I previously told you, my name is David Yanetti. I'm an attorney with an office in Boston, together with attorneys Alan Jackson and Elizabeth Little.
Boom! Coffindaffer, you're wrong. Wrong. Said, oh, David Yanetti didn't even introduce himself to the jury. He did it twice. He did it twice. He did it twice upon the first opening when everybody stood up in court and announced who they were, and he's just doing it right here. Good morning. Good morning to the courtroom and the jurors. As I said, my name is David Yanetti, and he's going into his monologue here. So, you're wrong. You're wrong. I'm going to play this here.
It's truly my privilege and my honor to represent Karen Reed during this trial. From a very early juncture in this case, you will question the Commonwealth's theory of the case. You will question the quality of the Commonwealth's evidence. You will question the veracity of the Commonwealth's witnesses. And you will question their shoddy and biased investigation, a faulty investigation that led to Karen Reed sitting here today. You will learn, in short, that the police did no real investigation of this case, and you will question why. You'll question why the investigators had such tunnel vision. You will question why they focused solely on Karen Reed, someone with no ties to the Canton Police Department, as opposed to the well-known and well-connected Albert family of Canton, a family that was never treated as suspects by the investigators in this case. Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found mortally injured on Brian Albert's front lawn. His body was in full view and almost right below Brian Albert's bedroom window on his front lawn. He was found wearing only one sneaker. You'll learn that Brian Albert was a Boston police officer as well, and that he was a trained first responder. Brian Albert was notified that another police officer was injured and unresponsive on his front lawn, and Brian Albert did nothing.
Boom!
His sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, and other civilians were on his property that morning after John O'Keefe's body was found. Police, EMTs, firefighters, police cruisers, an ambulance, fire truck, lights flashing, and first responder Brian Albert never came out of his house. Equally important for you,
Nick, if you're in the chat, grab that link and pop on here really quick, man. Come up on the show for a second. Let's see ya. I want to congratulate you, man. You killed it on Court TV, man. Come up here and come up on the panel for a second if you can get up here. I'd love to have you on.
will be the fact that the lead homicide investigators never went inside the Albert home that morning. You'll learn that Brian Albert's brother, Kevin Albert, is a Canton police officer. It was obvious very early on that the Canton police should not be investigating the death of a man found on the property of the brother of a Canton police officer. So it was decided just about from the start that the Massachusetts State Police should take complete control of this investigation because the Canton police were conflicted out.
A lot of background noise, buddy. Driving?
Yeah, I'm driving. I don't even have the radio on. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you have your window down?
Nothing.
Wow.
Is there a lot of noise?
Yeah, it's all right, though. We get through it. Hey, congratulations on Court TV tonight, man. You did a really great job.
Thanks. I wish it was a little longer. It seems that Vinny likes to bring me on to talk about the protesting and the supporters, but I don't think he knows how much I know about this case. And I'm ready to lay the facts out, but, you know, it's his show, so he runs it.
Yeah, they keep cutting you off. I think they're almost a little bit of afraid because they know that you're gonna go in that direction. I don't know, but yeah, great job, man.
So actually, I don't know if you know this, but the guy I was on with was Colin Albert's old attorney.
Yeah, I did know that. That's crazy.
So I was talking to him about it a little bit beforehand, and I was like, you represented Colin, right? And he's like, yeah, he wasn't in the house. I go, well, what about Brian Albert's grand jury testimony? He said, well, that was before he got in the house. That was before. I go, okay, but what about the 12:33 phone call to Tom Beatty's daughter? He's like, well, I don't know. I go, and what about his knuckles? He's like, well, that was 6 weeks after the fact. I go, so why don't you represent him anymore? And he didn't answer me on that question. He didn't answer me. Let me see if I can turn
So
this
are you
on.
going to go back there and do? Are you going to go back and do more spots or no?
Yeah, I'm supposed to go on tomorrow night and Wednesday night as well. But the past couple times I've gone on, it seems like it's to talk about us. But whatever he wants to talk about, I'm down for it. Any way I can bring awareness to this case, and I think today we have a good chance to potentially appeal this motion now, because some of the things that we wanted tailored was, why can't you bring the jury through the back door? Why can't you bring them in a bus? Why can't you do this stuff? And basically they were like, no, we're not doing that. And they did it today. So it's like, after denying us, they just don't want us out front. That's all it is they don't want us out front because Judge Bev said no. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because all the entities involved, they keep taking us back. I was just telling my audience today, they're saying, why don't you have your press credentials? I applied for my press credentials 4 times. 4 times. But I'm telling you, because they know that I'm covering this case, and they know my involvement in this case, they won't give it to me.
Yeah. So I was told today, apparently they wanted Wendy Murphy on the show, and she declined. And from what I've been told, this is not 100% yet, but either tomorrow or Wednesday I may be on Court TV with Yellow Cottage Steel.
Oh, well, certainly everybody will have to look out for that.
Yeah, well, hopefully, if they bring him on, he's not talking about protesting, so maybe I'll be able to speak my mind a little bit, about Michael Proctor and his dirty work over there, what he's doing, searching through cell phones and looking for naked pictures. And, that all I can say is that's the beginning of it. And what we're going to hear during trial when Michael Proctor's on the stand is going to make people's mouths drop. We heard the other day Liza Little say in court that there are numerous amounts of government misconduct by Michael Proctor.
Wow. And
we only heard about, the nudes, and that he was talking to his buddies saying, she should kill herself and all that stuff, which I was talking to Vinny about that a little bit, and he's, in all his years of being a prosecutor and being on this case, he's never heard of a lead investigator ever doing something like that. Ever.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's illegal. He didn't have a search warrant to do it. And number two, under an IA investigation, I was the lead person investigating Michael Proctor. Definitely would raise an eyebrow right now. I'd probably be talking to him and firing him tomorrow.
Well, so what I can say about the IA investigation was the reason why so Adam Lally in court the other day had said, we handed stuff over and we don't know what they're investigating. That's a bullshit lie. He knows exactly what they're investigating because he handed the information over to them, because the Massachusetts State Police Attorney wanted the information by the feds, and it was handed over to them. Now, if Adam Lally didn't look through what he was handing over, shame on him. But the information that the defense found is most likely the same information that the Internal Affairs Department is looking at, and it's going to be game over. Whether the Massachusetts State Police reprimand him or the FBI reprimand him, I don't see him being a police officer much longer.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I think what we heard today was just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be many, many, many other things that the defense will bring out about Michael Proctor and his tactics. And it's going to be very, very questionable. A lot of things to be done. I agree.
And the two people they had on stand today, Paul O'Keefe and Aaron, they didn't help the prosecution. Yeah. They didn't help at all. They didn't make her look evil, like I think the prosecution wanted. They actually humanized her. They John, Paul was saying, he actually liked Karen and he blew her a kiss in the hospital. And they didn't even think about Karen killing him until somebody put it in their head. And who is that somebody?
Yeah, exactly. And, they got on that stand today. They said that Karen was a good person. She was welcomed around the family. And it was even Erin that said that when she asked Karen what happened that night, she said, I went back. John was there. I performed CPR and told about the whole situation. And then we see the video today of Terry and Jen where they don't look interested at all. They're
you talking about the dash cam?
Who's Terry calling during all of that? We saw her on her phone. Who's she talking to?
So I was tired. I ended up taking a nap. Did they show the whole dash cam?
No, it wasn't all.
So some of the stuff you'll see there is she walks away. I don't know if they showed that part, but
They
Terry
did show it.
Ross,
She walks away. Yeah, they did show that.
Yep, she leaves. When they put John's body on that hospital stretcher, Jen McCabe's standing right there in front of the police officer's dash cam. And the minute they bring John over, she immediately turns her back, and you're going to see this. She turns her back to him, and this is all going to come out. Everything that's been talked about is true. It's all going to come out. The Reed family, the reason why they smile in court, because they know the information. They're confident. They know what they have. David Yanetti knows what they have. Like, this is going to be just listening to opening statement, open and shut. Like, Lally has no interest being there. None at all. No interest.
Yeah, he's done. He's a sunk ship. And going back to the video, and I think it actually helps Karen as well too, because we saw her in this extreme emotional, hysterical state today. And the recorded 911 call that we actually heard the audio on the dash cam tape. They hear it.
But they shut it off, didn't they? They didn't play the whole thing. Didn't they mute it towards the beginning? Or maybe they just muted it for TV. Maybe they played it in court. But if you hear the audio, it's traumatizing. I mean, you hear Karen screaming. She cannot compose herself. Like, she just found her boyfriend dead on the front lawn, and she is acting like somebody just found him, and then you have Jen, not a tear. Kerry, she seems a little concerned, but not as concerned as Karen was. And that's going to speak volumes alone. Why are you acting one way and the other one is completely not even fazed by this, almost like she knew he was already out there?
Yeah. I mean, if I was a juror looking at that, I would say, why are they not engaged? And you have Karen Reed, the person that's on trial for murder, she's hysterical and running all over the place, clearly emotional, covering her eyes, wiping her tears. I mean, to me, that signals that's a woman that is trying to save her boyfriend. She's concerned. I mean, it doesn't look like a cold-blooded killer to me. I don't know.
Yep. So one other thing too is, and I had just seen this picture for the first time today, and I've seen a lot of stuff, but there's a picture of Karen's vehicle in the driveway when she arrives back at John's house. And there's John's vehicle, there's her vehicle, and then there's someone else's vehicle. I believe it might have been Nathan's car or maybe her dad's vehicle. But everybody in the driveway, nobody's looking at her taillight. Everybody that was outside, nobody was looking at her taillight. And if it was that smashed, why weren't you looking at that?
It's funny that you said that, because earlier today I was talking to one of my moderators and we were talking about that. They're showing all the video of everybody pulling behind Karen's SUV. And I would think, and they saw her dad was literally standing a foot from her SUV. And if this taillight was smashed the way that they said it was supposed to be, wouldn't Karen's dad kind of point and say, hey, your taillight is fucked? Like,
right. I mean, and I don't think, leading up to trial, everyone was saying it was a blizzard, it was a blizzard, it was a blizzard. And we saw today, you would have seen a body on the lawn. There was not that much snow. It wasn't going to cover him completely. So everybody sorry, I'm going over like a shit ton of bumps right now. Holy smokes. So one thing that they were all saying was, it was snowing. It was a blizzard. And then Paul O'Keefe said, it had just started snowflaking a little bit at 8 o'clock at night. So if it was only snowing a little bit when John was supposedly hit at 12:30, why didn't they see him outside?
And even the officer that testified today said that it was only a light dusting of snow on the ground, not the 6 inches of snow that supposedly was on top of John.
Right,
So he
there
even
wasn't.
confirmed it.
Yeah, I think David Yanetti gave. I was just gonna watch it as you were playing, but David Yanetti gave a kick-ass opening statement. To me, it seemed like he went third party without naming a culprit, and it was accepted. So, I mean, maybe that's why they had a sidebar after for so long. Probably trying to yell, I don't know, say something to him about what he did. But hey, he got to say what he wanted to say, and then tomorrow morning we get to open up with Alan Jackson on a cross-examination. To be honest, I'm very happy that they're not going to. And I said this about the kids too. I personally don't think they're going to cross-examine the kids as well. If they didn't cross-examine Paul and Aaron, they're not going to cross.
No. Nick, we're starting to lose you. We're going to, we lost audio on Nick. I don't know. Nick, we're losing you, buddy. I got to have you come back on sometime when you're planted and you're able to come back on. I'd love to have you come back on. I think you're just in a bad cell spot, but I'll get you back on sometime. I'll reach out. And great job on Court TV, by the way. Yeah, we lost. I can't hear him. Yeah, there's no audio. I'll have you back sometime, buddy. I'll have you back sometime. All right. There's Nick, Rocco. Good job on Court TV. I'll get him back here sometime. I'll actually have him if he has time to come in and sit in the studio when we get this up and running over here. We'll get him back. But let's go back through David Yanetti's opening statement here. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for jumping on.
Now, that sounded good at the time, but you'll learn that two major problems arose. First, despite the fact that they obviously had a conflict of interest, the evidence will show that the Canton police still had their hands in this investigation. You will find it astounding, but Canton police officer Kevin Albert, the reason for the conflict of interest in the first place, was continually updated about the status of this investigation while it was going on. Second, and equally troubling, is that the lead state police detective who was assigned to this case was a man named Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor, you will learn, is one of the many people in Canton with deep ties to the Albert family. Michael Proctor's own mother refers to the Alberts as the Proctor's second family. His own sister's wedding, Michael Proctor was in the wedding party with Colin Albert, and he sat at the head table of that wedding with members of the Albert family. That's the man who was chosen to lead the investigation into the suspicious death on the property of Brian Albert. That's the man who gave updates to Canton police officer Kevin Albert while the state police were supposed to be investigating what had occurred at his brother Brian Albert's house. You'll learn that right from the jump, Michael Proctor predetermined the outcome of this case. Never stepped foot inside the Albert home on January 29th, 2022. Never checked out whether there were any signs of struggle inside that home. He never called for crime scene technicians and other specialists to look for blood or other trace evidence within the home. He never asked Brian Albert for permission to go in the home and take a look around. Michael Proctor never applied for a search warrant to go in that home. Instead, he focused immediately and exclusively on Karen Reed, the outsider. You will learn that no one in the Proctor family has ever called the Reed family their second family. No one in the Proctor family had been in a wedding party with anyone from the Reed family. Karen Reed was a convenient outsider. She was most definitely not from Canton. So how did Michael Proctor feel about her? How did he treat somebody he was investigating at a point in time when he should have been keeping an open mind focusing on obtaining all possible evidence so that he didn't miss anything? Well, you will learn that on the very day that John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, Michael Proctor was texting with his high school buddies about this supposedly secret investigation using his personal cell phone. He was revealing information about this investigation to his friends, assuming that nobody would ever find out what he was doing and what he was saying. And he was revealing his true thoughts about Karen Reed to his friends, not what he put in his sanitized police reports, his true feelings to his friends whom he trusted, and in text messages that he never thought would come into the hands of the defense in this case. Lead investigator Trooper Michael Proctor, right from the start, called Karen Reed names you would reserve only for your worst enemies.
Boom.
He told his friends that he hoped that she would kill herself.
Boom.
He told his friends that he had seized her cell phone. And you will learn that he knew he shouldn't have been accessing any content on her cell phone because he knew there would likely be attorney-client communications on between Karen and me at that time. He knew that he was supposed to wait for a search warrant or other permission from a judge in order to go through that phone. But you'll learn that he went through the phone anyway, without permission.
Boom.
And you'll know that he did because he told his high school buddies that he was searching her phone for nude photos of Karen Reed.
Boom.
And he was disappointed he hadn't found any yet. That is the professional and unbiased investigator who was chosen to lead the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. You will learn that one of Michael Proctor's high school friends commented to him that with a dead body on the front lawn, the homeowner in this case is surely going to catch a lot of grief. And do you know what Michael Proctor's response to that was? One word. Nope. And he explained why. Michael Proctor assured his buddies that the homeowner would not catch a lot of grief because, quote, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, end quote. That one sentence, ladies and gentlemen, in Michael Proctor's own words, will explain a lot to you about how this investigation was conducted. You will be able to evaluate whether Trooper Michael Proctor treated Brian Albert and his family differently because of who they are and their relationships between his family and theirs. You will evaluate whether this investigation was on the up and up. You will decide, as a result, how valuable or worthless the prosecution's DNA evidence is or is not, in light of who controlled that evidence. You will learn that Michael Proctor's fingerprints are figuratively all over this case. His fingerprints are all over the Commonwealth's evidence. You will learn that Michael Proctor showed up at Karen Reed's parents' house in Dighton to interview her during the afternoon of January 29th, only hours after John O'Keefe's body was found dead on Brian Albert's front lawn. You'll learn that Michael Proctor had her Lexus SUV towed from her parents' home. But you'll also learn that he wrote a search warrant in which he falsified the time that he took that SUV.
Boom.
He
Dropping
swore
bombs
under oath that the vehicle wasn't towed until 5:30 p.m. But you'll learn that we obtained surveillance footage that he didn't know we would get. And that surveillance footage exposed that Michael Proctor's words in that sworn affidavit were a lie. Michael Proctor had that vehicle for about 90 minutes before he claimed to have taken it. And folks, you will learn that the timing is important, very important. Because when John O'Keefe was first found on Brian Albert's front lawn, the police thoroughly searched that yard for potential evidence. And it wasn't just one officer or two or three. There were at least 4 officers that searched that front lawn. And that morning was the beginning of a snowstorm, but there wasn't yet much snow on the ground when they were searching that lawn. It was light out by the time they did the search, and it was getting lighter. And during that thorough search of Brian Albert's front lawn, the number of pieces of taillight that were found by a minimum of 4 officers looking for evidence was 0. It was only later in the day, when the snow was really starting to accumulate, that the police miraculously started to find pieces of taillight on the property. The police only started to find pieces of taillight after Michael Proctor had seized Karen Reed's car. They only started to find pieces of taillight after Michael Proctor had possession of her taillight. You'll learn that Trooper Michael Proctor.
This is good here, and I'm probably guessing the jury is right in front of Karen. You can see Alan Jackson looking at the jury. You can see Karen looking at the jury. This is good. This is a good move during this testimony about Michael Proctor. So really, really good stuff here. Oh, are we going to play or are we not going to play? Come on, stream. Let's go. You got to be kidding me. All right, what's going on here? We got the spinny wheel. Come on.
On the property.
There we go.
The police only started to find pieces of taillight after Michael Proctor had seized Karen Reed's car. They only started to find pieces of taillight after Michael Proctor had possession of her taillight. You'll learn that Trooper Michael Proctor then kept going back.
They're trying to see how the jury's reacting to this. I see Jackson looking pretty deep at all the jurors here, and Karen looking over to confirm that, you know, this is all a sham. But you see Jackson's analyzing.
To the Albert residence after that day, and he claims to have kept finding pieces of taillight on multiple occasions on multiple different days. And in addition, a good week after John O'Keefe's death, Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz, an older officer on the brink of retirement with probably not the best eyesight, he supposedly was happened to be driving past Brian Albert's house. And by the way, Brian Albert is someone with whom Chief Berkowitz is also good friends. And this older man allegedly spotted yet another piece of taillight from his moving vehicle. This was yet another piece of taillight that was somehow missed by the trained specialists who had previously and thoroughly searched the property. Another piece of taillight that Proctor supposedly missed in the many times he went back to the property. Michael Proctor claims that he kept finding pieces of taillight right up until February 18th of 2022, which was nearly 3 weeks after John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn. You will learn that there is no competent evidence that Karen Reed's taillight shattered at Brian Albert's property in the early morning hours of January 29th, 2022. To the contrary, you'll learn that when Karen left John at Brian Albert's house, she drove back to John's house on Meadows Ave across town in Canton. At John's home, where he lived with his 2 adopted children, Karen was drifting in and out of sleep, but she woke up for good in a panic sometime around 4 a.m. because John hadn't come home. And that was not like him at all. He had never done that before. Karen had a sinking feeling that something was wrong. Something was seriously wrong. So she got back into her Lexus and she backed up out of the garage to leave the driveway. And when she did, the right rear taillight of her Lexus struck John's parked vehicle in the driveway and her taillight cracked. That was the same taillight that the prosecution now claims was broken outside the Albert residence hours earlier at 12:38. But we have video evidence that the taillight was actually broken at 5 a.m. many hours after the prosecution needs that taillight to have been broken. There is, of course, no video of the taillight being broken at Brian Albert's house. You will eventually conclude
that is one of the biggest sticking points in this case. There is no video of Karen hitting John. Why? Because it never happened. And they know it never happened. So everybody's going to cover up and say, oh, well, our cameras didn't record. It didn't save. My camera wasn't working. And Yanetti just lays it out there. You will never see a video of it. If she did this, and there's a million cameras in that, and they're going to show this to the jury. This house has a camera. That house has a camera. That house has a camera. But none of the cameras worked. Or they're going to say all of the data was erased, and we can prove that and show it. Why? If you really want to nail Karen Read and put her down for this, then why is there no video? Where is it? Where's the video? It's not there because it never happened.
That's because the taillight was not broken there. Importantly, you will learn that there was an eyewitness who arrived at 34 Fairview after Karen got there with John O'Keefe in the early morning hours of January 29th. And that eyewitness, Brian Nagel, who's the brother of Julie Nagel, who was at the after-hours party that night. He had a clear view of Karen's SUV.
Love this.
Brian Nagel confirms that there was no damage to her taillight at that time. Karen was sitting in the driver's seat with her hands at 10 and 2. And Ryan Nagel confirms that while Karen was inside the car,
no one else
John O'Keefe was not.
But where was he?
John O'Keefe was also not
Fairview.
outside the car at that time. You will ultimately conclude there's only one other place he could have been. Now, going back to that 5 a.m. video from John's driveway, you will see Karen back up her Lexus and strike John's car at about 5 a.m. when she was leaving John's house to go out to look for him. And you will know that she struck his car at 5 a.m. because you will watch that video closely. You will witness that the wheels and the hubcaps on John's car are jostled and moved by Karen's SUV. And you will conclude that that video depicts exactly when Karen's taillight was cracked, long after she dropped off John that night at 34 Fairview. And you will learn that part of the reason that Karen's Lexus hit John's car was that Karen was panicked at that time. Where is John? Why didn't he come home? What happened to him? And you will learn that she was racking her brain for what possibly could have happened. And like many of us, was worried about the worst. Did I hit him? Could I have hit him? That was what she was saying, both to herself and to other people later that morning when she went back to 34 Fairview. She couldn't think of anything else that made sense. She certainly didn't consider in a million years that someone from within the Albert home could have beaten up John and left him to die on the front lawn. Now, that was over 2 years ago. Karen didn't know then what you will learn during this trial. Karen didn't know that Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, left the after-hours party at Brian Albert's house sometime after Karen pulled away. She didn't know that after Jennifer McCabe dropped off some people elsewhere, she returned to her own home. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe climbed some stairs in her home and eventually made it into her bedroom with her cell phone. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe settled in at 2:27 in the morning on January 29th, 2022, and typed a Google search that she would later delete. 2:27 in the morning was over 3 hours before John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn. 2:27 was over 3 hours before anyone knew or suspected that John O'Keefe was missing or hurt or in trouble. And at 2:27 in the morning, you will learn that with no one watching her, thinking she was alone with her thoughts, not worrying that anyone would know what she was doing, Jennifer McCabe typed in the following Google search: how long to die in the cold? Now, she misspelled the first word, so the actual search was "hoss long to die in the cold," but you'll get the point. You will ask yourself,
What's going on,
why
Paul?
would
Good
somebody
to see you.
Google how long does it take for someone to die?
And I just want to thank Paul. Last night he jumped on the live. We had kind of a locals live last night going into the trial. And Paul, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. And anytime you need a platform, you're always welcome here on LTL. And we'll do something again soon here when we get a couple weeks into the trial. I'd love to have you back on, get maybe the same group of people on there. So long day. I know you just left the courthouse a while ago. Wow, that's crazy. We had Nick on. You missed him. We had Nick on just a little while ago. He recapped us. But we're just going to play through the rest of Yanetti here and then wrap the sucker up in about 10-15 minutes. But again, if you all didn't see that show last night, go back and watch it. It was a great show. We had Paul Cristoforo on, Tracy and Dana, Resistance of Silence crew. We had Rita on. Tom CPU was over here. We had a fantastic power panel last night. So good stuff. All right, let's keep playing through and finish this up and get some final thoughts.
Cold, unless that person knew someone who either was in that situation or would be in that situation. You will question during this trial, who was it who actually did die in the cold at some point that night, sometime after Jen McCabe was asking Google for an answer to her question. And you'll learn that the answer to that question was John O'Keefe. The medical examiner in this case will testify that one of the causes of John O'Keefe's death was hypothermia. John O'Keefe died in part because he was left to die in the cold. Now, the Commonwealth will try to dispute the timing of that Google search. They'll try to claim that there were only 2 Google searches at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. after John's body was found. But one problem for the Commonwealth will be that we have retained Richard Green, one of the leading computer forensic experts in the country. Rick Green has forensically analyzed Jennifer McCabe's phone, both manually and using every appropriate type of computer software to solve this issue. Rick Green will confirm for you that Jennifer McCabe did indeed make that search at 2:27 a.m. And another problem for the Commonwealth is that you will hear and see other evidence that will confirm that Jennifer McCabe is lying when she denies making that Google search at 2:27 a.m. You will conclude that before she went to bed, if she went to bed that night, Jennifer McCabe wanted to know just how long it would take for someone to die in the cold. And a big question in this trial for you will be, when was John O'Keefe left to die in the cold? I expect the Commonwealth will try to persuade you that he was left there sometime around 12:30 a.m. because they're going to try to prove to you that Karen Reed hit him and that his body stayed there the entire night until first responders arrived at 6 a.m. and his body was taken to the hospital. But you will learn that there are big problems with the Commonwealth's theory of this case. You will learn that there were 6 people at that after-hours party at Brian Albert's house, all of whom left by the front door and would have been confronted by John O'Keefe's lifeless body on that lawn if he was actually there at that time. Those 6 people walked out the front door to 34 Fairview, walked to their cars, either in the driveway or parked in front of the house.
This is an excellent point by David Yanetti.
Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, was there. Her husband, Matthew McCabe, was there. ATF federal agent Brian Higgins was there, who was also Brian Albert's friend. Sarah Levinson, a friend of Brian Albert Jr., was there. Julie Nagel, another friend of Brian Albert Jr., was there. And Caitlin Albert, Brian Albert's daughter, was also there. All of them leaving the residence. Each of those people left 34 Fairview in Canton, where Brian Albert lived. Each of them walked out facing the front lawn, where the Commonwealth will tell you that a 6'2", nearly 220-pound big man in dark clothing was sprawled on the front lawn when there was only a dusting of white snow on the ground. He was supposedly sprawled on that lawn, just feet from where these people were walking when they left the residence. And you will learn that not one of these people saw John O'Keefe laying. Not one. And you know who else saw no one laying outside in the early morning hours of January 29th? The snowplow driver in charge of plowing the street for the city of Canton. And this is another big problem for the Commonwealth. You will learn that Michael Proctor, here's that name again, wrote a report where he claimed that the DPW supervisor had told him that Fairview Road had not been plowed that night. Proctor's total investigation on this issue consisted of one phone call and no follow-up. He just submitted his report that simply said the road hadn't been plowed that night, and perhaps thinking that no one else would follow up either. But you'll learn that when it came to finding out the truth, it's not that Proctor couldn't find the truth, it's that he wouldn't. But fortunately, you'll learn that we would, and we did. You'll learn that within weeks after January 29th, we sent our investigator, a former Medford police officer named Paul Makowski, to the Canton DPW to try to get to the bottom of this. Paul Makowski talked to the same supervisor at the DPW, a man named Michael Trotta, whom Proctor claimed had told him that the street hadn't been plowed that night. You'll learn that Paul Makowski found out that Michael Proctor was not telling the truth. You'll learn that Michael Trotta from the DPW told Paul Makowski, our investigator, that the street was indeed plowed that night, and that the name of the plow driver was Brian Loughran. So Paul Makowski tracked down Brian Loughran. He asked Mr. Loughran if the state police or any investigators had ever spoken to him. And the answer came back, no. You will then learn what Brian Loughran had to say about what he saw and didn't see that night, and you will be shocked. Brian Loughran told Paul Makowski that he was driving a big snowplow in Canton that night. You'll learn that the nickname for it at the DPW was Frankenstein, because it had a lot of spare parts and it had been around forever. Brian Loughran told Paul Makowski that when he plows the streets of Canton in Frankenstein, he's very careful. He makes sure to check not only the roads in front of him, but also the yards to the side of his plow. He makes sure not to hit a fire hydrant or a tree or an animal, or heaven forbid, a person lying in the snow. He's always on the lookout. You'll learn that Brian Loughran passed by 34 Fairview in his plow, traveling right by Brian Albert's front lawn at 2:30 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Loughran confirms that at about 2:30, when he went by that house, John O'Keefe was not on that front lawn. So you'll learn that about 2 hours after the Commonwealth claims that Karen Reed somehow incapacitated John O'Keefe, an eyewitness confirms that not only could it not have happened, but it didn't happen. But you'll learn that Brian Loughran also provides some other troubling testimony for the Commonwealth. You'll learn that after making that pass at 2:30 in the morning and seeing no body, he showed up again at the entrance to Fairview Road, intending to make another pass down it with his plow.
Whoops.
This time, however, at about 3:30 in the morning, he looked down the street and he saw that parked right next to Brian Albert's front lawn, right in the very area where John O'Keefe's body was later found at 6 a.m.,
That's why they had to get rid of the videos. That's why no one's camera worked that night, because this all would have been caught on camera.
Brian Loughran saw a Ford Edge parked on the side of the road. You will learn that the police have done zero investigation to discover whose Ford Edge that was. You'll learn that members of the Albert family drove Ford Edges. You'll learn that the police to this day claim not to know who was parked right next to the area where John O'Keefe's body was later found. You will learn that while investigators on this case, including Michael Proctor, completely ignored the snowplow driver who went right by the Albert residence. The defense not only tracked him down and interviewed him, but the plow driver actually took our investigator on a ride back past the residence to explain the precise route that he had taken on January 29th. You'll learn that some other curious things were going on in the early morning hours of January 29th. Curious things that the police in this case utterly failed to investigate. For example, after people left the after-hours party at Brian Albert's house on January 29, Brian Albert claimed that he had no contact with anyone but his wife until he was woken up in the morning. But you will learn that he was ultimately confronted by the fact that his phone records revealed that he had actually placed a phone call to ATF agent Brian Higgins, his friend, the same friend who had been at his house earlier that night. And that was at 2:22 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Higgins called him back 17 seconds later, and they connected for 22 seconds on their cell phones. You'll be asked to consider just how long 22 seconds is and what could be said and discussed during that long of a phone call. You will consider that phone call in the context of the other curious things that were going on during the early morning hours of January 29th. You will learn about the following in chronological order. 2:12 a.m., Jennifer
I love that Yanetti did this because it lays it out to the jury. It gives the timeline and gets it in their head. And I think it's perfect timing because in about 10 minutes, he's getting ready to wrap. This will stay fresh in their minds. I love this. I love this right here. And he's going to simplify it, unlike when you hear Lally earlier in this, his opening statement was all over the place.
McCabe arrives at her home. 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert calls Brian Higgins. 2:22 a.m., 17.
Called connecting the dots to everything that he just talked about. I love it with timestamps.
15 seconds later, Higgins calls him back, and Brian Albert and Brian Higgins are on the phone together for 22 seconds. 2:23 a.m., Jennifer McCabe climbs the stairs to her bedroom. 2:27 a.m., Jennifer McCabe searches on Google how long to die in the cold. 2:30 a.m., plow driver Brian Laughlin confirms there was no body on Brian Albert's front lawn. 3:30 a.m., Brian Laughlin confirms that a Ford Edge was parked right where John O'Keefe's body was later found. The Commonwealth will not be able to successfully dispute any of those facts, yet I expect that they will persist in asking you to convict Karen Reed anyway. You will learn that there are other major problems with the Commonwealth's theory. You'll learn that when John O'Keefe was found, he did not look like he had been hit by a car. You'll learn that he looked to have been attacked and beaten up. You'll learn that John O'Keefe was a large 6'2" man who, if positioned behind a Lexus SUV, would have had his torso completely exposed to the rear of that vehicle, including to the taillight. You'll learn that no part of his torso was injured. There was no bruising, no redges, no scratches, no punctures. You'll learn that his chest and hips and legs were pristine, despite the Commonwealth's contention.
Remember, I talked about this. I said, if John was hit so hard and he fell out of his shoes, as the Commonwealth's trying to describe, then why was there no twisted ankle or twisted knee or broken leg or fractures or anything like that on his legs? She hit him so hard, no upper body injuries. We talked about this as well. No rib injuries, no chest injuries, nothing.
That he was hit by a 6,000-pound vehicle. The evidence will show that what was not pristine was his right arm. You will take one look at that arm, and you will conclude that a car did not cause those injuries. The injuries to John O'Keefe's arm appear to be consistent with scratch marks and claw marks, marks that make it look as though an animal had attacked his arm. But you won't have to rely just on your common sense when you look at those photos. You'll hear from an expert forensic pathologist who is world-renowned, who has personally conducted thousands of autopsies. And he will testify that those marks are consistent with scratch and claw marks and bite marks from an animal, including a German Shepherd. You'll learn that on January 29th of 2022, Brian Albert's family dog, Chloe, was a German Shepherd. You'll learn that Brian Albert has admitted that this dog is not good around strangers. You'll learn that on January 29th of 2022, John O'Keefe would have been a stranger to that dog. And you'll learn that Chloe had been the beloved family dog for the Alberts for 7 years. The Albert family loved Chloe. But strangely, as we discuss this dog today, the Albert family doesn't have its beloved Chloe anymore. You'll learn that Brian Albert was called to testify before the grand jury regarding this matter in April of 2022, and that he did testify about his German Shepherd, Chloe, during that grand jury testimony. And you'll learn that not long after that testimony, Brian Albert and his family rehomed their beloved family dog. They gave away their family dog. And Chloe, the German Shepherd, is therefore now gone. Now, the Commonwealth will try to take your attention away from all of these troubling facts and try to persuade you not to consider their shocking lack of investigation of anyone else, not to consider John O'Keefe's injuries, not to consider the fact that multiple people left the residence and saw no body, not to consider the fact that the snowplow driver was specifically looking at 2:30 a.m. and there was no body there, not to consider the fact that 2 people in the house were communicating at 2:22 a.m. but denied speaking to each other for 22 seconds, and not to consider the fact that one of their witnesses, who was also present at the home, was unusually curious at 2:27 a.m. about how long it would take for someone to die in the cold. The Commonwealth will instead try to persuade you that Karen Read supposedly had a motive to kill John O'Keefe because they were not getting along. You'll hear about their trip to Aruba over New Year's Eve and that Karen was upset that John had been flirting with another woman. And you will hear that Karen considered exploring her options after that trip, which led her to a get-together at one point with ATF federal agent Brian Higgins, although that never went anywhere. But you'll also hear that in January of 2022, after the Aruba trip, and not long before January 28th and 29th, John O'Keefe was making long-term plans with Karen, including a family trip with her and the kids, and also another trip with Karen and another couple for months into the future. And you'll see video of how John and Karen were interacting on the night in question. You'll see for yourself how they looked at each other from the video at the waterfall that night. Nobody who saw them that night saw anything wrong. There was nothing wrong. I mean, like any couples, occasionally they would bicker or disagree, but you will hear zero evidence of any domestic violence in that home whatsoever. John never raised a hand in anger toward Karen, and Karen never raised a hand in anger toward John. That simply wasn't who they are. You will conclude the notion that Karen Read chose the start of a snowstorm to suddenly become violent out of the blue for the first time and intentionally kill her boyfriend by hitting him with her car and leaving him there with a house full of people inside is patently ridiculous. You will also learn that what's not ridiculous is that someone, not Karen Read, ambushed John O'Keefe. Somebody probably didn't mean to kill him, but somebody went too far. You'll learn that Trooper Proctor failed to investigate motives that other people had to harm John O'Keefe. You'll learn that Proctor failed to investigate anything or anyone who was in the Albert residence that night. You'll learn that he failed to investigate the antagonistic relationship between members of the Albert family and John O'Keefe. You'll learn that apparently nobody investigates the Albert family of Canton. Remember, on day one, Trooper Proctor was asked whether the homeowner, Brian Albert, would catch a lot of grief. And Trooper Proctor himself said it. Nope. Homeowner's a Boston cop too. So folks, the trial is now about to start, and the witnesses are about to start testifying. On behalf of Karen Reed, I ask that you do two things during this trial. First, I ask that you pay attention to all of the evidence. The way trials work, the prosecution gets to present its case first. They conduct their direct examinations first. So we respectfully ask that you wait for us. We will get to cross-examine their witnesses, and you will find that cross-examination is the key that unlocks the truth. Wait for us. You'll be glad that you did. Second, I ask that you keep your eye on the ball. You have one job and one job only to do during this trial, and that job, quite frankly, is not to solve this case. Your only job during this trial is to determine whether the Commonwealth, the prosecution, has proven to you each and every element of the crimes they have charged, beyond a reasonable doubt, to a moral certainty. The prosecution will fail to prove this case to a moral certainty. They will fail to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. You will reasonably doubt their case because their theory of the case does not make sense. You will reasonably doubt their case because Karen Reed was framed, and the evidence shows that, despite the fact that the police never ever investigated that angle of this case at all. Because the prosecution will not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty, we will stand before you again at the end of this trial and ask that you find Karen Reed not guilty.
Excellent. 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 The new Crime Fix, if anybody's interested, it just come on. Looks like they're recapping, but excellent, 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 excellent opening from Yanetti. I think Lally fell majorly short today, and I talked about him getting Paul and Erin O'Keefe up on the stand and trying to build the character of Karen Reed, of someone that didn't care, someone that wanted to leave this relationship and wanted her out, but ultimately ended up painting Karen in a very good light, saying that she was a good person. She took care of the kids at John's house, and was welcomed and liked by the family. So I think Lally lost it there. I think he knew he was going down a pretty bad path. And then when the officer got on and testified, it just became even worse with the video, the dash cam video that was played today. And in my opinion, it showed Carrie and Jen McCabe to be not so interested in what was going on and showed a very hysterical Karen Reed. And, I go back and look. If Karen Reed wants John O'Keefe dead, then why did she immediately jump out and start performing mouth-to-mouth on John O'Keefe? And, why would she be so hysterical? Wouldn't she be the one that would be disinterested, walking away from Officer John O'Keefe? Would she be walking away, not care, no care in the world? And so what? She grabbed a bag from his residence. Again, we don't know the contents of that bag. We know that Karen Reed has some medical issues. Maybe it's medicine. Maybe it was a night bag from the night before because she was over there and stayed. That doesn't make her a killer that she grabbed some of her things to leave. So, my friends, thank you so much for joining this live tonight, this live recap. I banged out about an 8-hour live earlier today if you want to go back and watch the full testimony. And when I try to do this and do these testimonies, I keep the talking to basically zero or a minimum because I want you to hear all the important facts in this case and the testimony that's being said. As far as my schedule, I don't have the ability to stream all of the testimony every single day. I do have a day job, but I'm going to try to do my best to recap. I wouldn't say every single night, but I'll try to do my best to come back and recap maybe if every couple of days pop up. And then on my off days, if I have time given, I promise to do maybe a mix of maybe going down there and streaming or just going down there and spending some time in live streaming. But, you know, I'll kind of play it by ear at this point. But I appreciate everybody coming in and supporting my channel, all the super chats that came through today, all the buy me a coffees, the cash apps. I really do appreciate the support. It helps keep this channel going and growing, and it helps keep the, now I can say it, the lights on here in the studio. So I do appreciate that. But I will be back soon. I plan on coming back tomorrow night and doing a recap and review. Unfortunately, I would love to stream everything tomorrow, but I just can't. I have to go to work, but I'll try to pick up the important pieces tomorrow and come back and recap it here if you want to spend some time with me. Oh, by the way, I want to thank Nick Rocco for jumping on this evening really quick, driving home, and I appreciate you getting on here with me, Nick, and recapping us for the events today. And phenomenal job on Court TV. Really great segment. And again, thank you for jumping on here. Love all of you in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. I promise I'll be back tomorrow night live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll do another recap, and I'll try to do my best here and follow everything throughout the day. And then, like I said, again, on the off days, if I can come up and do it, time warranted, I will be out here either live streaming or being down at the courthouse. All right, everybody. I love all of you. Have an amazing night. I think it was a huge win for the defense today, and they didn't even have to do anything. They haven't even cross-examined a witness yet or called their own witnesses. It was definitely a power play today. Yanetti was on fire. I think Lally right now lost the jury. We'll see what happens tomorrow. We have a long way to go. Keep doing what you're doing. Support Karen in this case. We know that she's going to be exonerated in the end of all of this. This is all frivolous and made up, and she's factually innocent of all these charges. All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much for the support. I'm out.